start. So again, a warm welcome to Philosophy Live. My name is Armelle Young. I am a student and tutor of the School of Philosophy and Economic Science. And today we embark on a journey with a group of revolutionary women in the Middle Ages, and they're called the Beguines. So this is how you write that word, the Beguines. The Beguines. They were pioneering women. They lived in small semi-religious, semi-secular communities, and there they worked, they studied, and they supported each other independently of any male control. And at that time, that was a true revolution. To understand the Beguines, we need to cast our minds back to what it was like in medieval Europe in the 12th and 13th centuries. It was a time of cathedral building, crusades, a blossoming intellectual revival. Yet it was also a world of stark gender hierarchies, where the roles of women were largely confined to marriage, motherhood, or monastic life. And the church had an immense power. It was dictating the spiritual and social norms of the day. So to give you a picture, imagine we're in 1310 in the heart of Paris, a stone throw from the then new Notre Dame Cathedral, and there lived a unique community. Behind high stone walls, 400 women were settled in small individual houses with a chapel in the middle. And there they prayed, they worked, they helped each other, but not a man in sight. You can still catch a sight of that place in Paris. It's called the Grand Royal Beguinage. This is what it looks like. Beguinage is the name that's given to these communities. This Grand Royal Beguinage is permanently closed now. You cannot visit it any longer. So how did this community come about? Well, this type of a revolutionary community was born in the late 12th century. As mentioned, in feudal society, women were under patriarchal authority with marriage or convent as their only options. But the Crusades took many men away, and convents, short on space and requiring dowries, could not accommodate them all. So what would become of all these women condemned to stay single? Well, they joined forces, and as a result, the Beguinages came into being. The first one was founded in Belgium, in Liège, in 1173, and there was a second one shortly afterwards in Wagny, that's in the north of France. But the movement became very large. In the following century, the model spread throughout Europe. In 1321, there was a letter from the Pope that mentions 200,000 Beguines living in Western Germany alone. And at their peak, in the early 14th century, they reached nearly 1 million across Europe. In France, the king supported them. When he returned from the Crusades, he offered them land in central Paris, outside any feudal domain, so free from any authority. And this is what became this Grand Royal Beguinage that we saw earlier. It was a stronghold for the Beguines in the middle of Paris, a citadel for women, a village within the heart of Paris. And within these walls, they lived in complete autonomy, free to venture into the city, but totally independent. Well, so what sort of women joined these Beguinages? Well, the movement attracted a diverse group of women. Some were wealthy widows seeking a meaningful life after the death of their husbands. Others were young women who rejected the confines of marriage or traditional monastic life. They lived in semi-religious communities, but they did not take any monastic vows. They were free to leave at any time. They were celibate, But they did not retire from the world. Instead, they worked, they wrote, they cared for the poor. What they did is blending deep contemplation with an active life. They sometimes founded hospitals, becoming nurses. Some of them showed a rare talent for business, opening small workshops for pottery, weaving, drapery, candle making, and they preached. They translated the Bible and other religious texts into common day, everyday French, and they taught these texts in their school. And this was exceptional for lay people, and even more so for women. One question is, how did they organize themselves within these beguinages? Well, the communities elected a great lady to lead the beguinage for a few years, and decisions were made in large gatherings that looked like general assemblies, a rare democratic practice then. Some Beguines boldly took up the pen. This was an unusual act for women at the time. Their writings were inspired, often mystical, and they dared to write in the local languages, whereas Latin was the only recognized language, so that caused a bit of a scandal with some of their contemporaries. Here are two examples of famous 13th century Beguines. They were also writers. We have Marguerite Porete and Hadewich of Antwerp. So Marguerite came from an area northeast of France. She had a high level of education, so she's likely to be of upper class origins. Her writings were considered radical for her time. They bypassed institutional teachings, institutional church teachings, in favor of a direct personal relationship with God. The witch is also very famous. She was a devout woman, probably living in what is now Belgium. She was of noble origins. She was a mystic and a poet, and love lies at the heart of her poetry. The witch explores love both as a spiritual force and as a force in day-to-day life. Her work talks a lot about the transformative potential of love, practically in day-to-day life, through devotion. Central to the philosophy of the Beguines was this concept of love, not as a mere emotion, but as a transformative force that dissolves all barriers between humans and between the human and the divine. They saw everything as one, as a unity within love. So, for example, this is what they write. So here we have Hadewich speaking here. So this is what she says. He who lives in love sees all things rightly, for through love the soul perceives the depth of God in all that exists. We've got Margaret here who says, this soul sees that all things are in God, and that God is in all things. In such a state, nothing is alien to her, for she knows herself in the oneness of love. So with the Beguines, we have here this strong concept of unity with everything and everyone through love. So naturally, this focus on love naturally and logically directed their social philosophy. For the Beguines, care of the poor, for the poor and the sick, was not merely charitable. It was just an extension of their vision. To serve others was to encounter the divine in the most tangible way. And this also fed their approach to relationships within their own communities. The Beguines cultivated an ethos of mutual support and respect, creating a space where individual growth was nurtured within their community environment. And long before these concepts were popular, the Beguines embodied the concepts of sisterhood and solidarity. And their approach to philosophy was profoundly democratic. They discussed and shared their thoughts and ideas within their communities. And this accessibility allowed their ideas to resonate with a broad audience, including those on the margins of society. But they faced many challenges. To start with, practical challenges, as you can imagine. Maintaining financial independence was a constant struggle, particularly for those communities that relied on manual labor or charitable donations. But also, unsurprisingly, these three women caused discomfort. Their unconventional approach did not sit well with everyone, especially within the church. Their refusal to conform to established roles, their piety, practiced far away from ecclesiastical authority, their idea of poverty, all this provoked suspicion, hostility, and criticisms often reflected broader anxieties about women's role in society. Their intellectual and spiritual autonomy was seen as a threat to the patriarchal order. And also, some of their mystical and theological ideas were considered very unconventional and even heretical, and some paid with their lives for their independence. For example, the Inquisition condemned notable figures, including Marguerite Porete, to the stake. But despite these obstacles, they managed to sustain vibrant communities that thrived for centuries. Initially, the church had supported them, but then it curtailed their independence, and much more than that. In 1311, the Church Council of Vienne classified their movement as heretical. It was the same ecumenical council that also declared the Knight Templars as heretics. And after that, the momentum was broken. Many communities were forced to close. Their assets were confiscated. In Paris, the Grand Royal Beguinage closed in 1317, reopening later, but with far stricter rules, and only to fall into ruins around 1470. Everywhere, free communities either transformed into enclosed ones with strict regulations, or they disappeared altogether. Only the Beguines in the Netherlands and Belgium, they were protected by two papal bulls, so they survived these persecutions. However, they had to give up some of their radicalism, and they had to draw closer to the church. So, goodbye independence. The Beguines had to toe the line now. But the movement still endured. By the late 19th century, around 600 Beguines remained in Belgium, and the last one of them passed away not long ago in 2013, closing for good the final chapter in the story of these women, free ahead of their time. Some beguinages have been preserved. It can still be visited. So here is one example here, one in Belgium, that is part of the World Heritage of the UNESCO. It was founded in 1238, but now it holds small houses built in the 17th century. You can still see the one that was allocated to the Great Lady. So why should we care about the Beguines in the 21st century? Well, because their story is a source of inspiration. They offer a model of living that's both transcendent and grounded. Their emphasis on love as a transformative force, their courage in challenging the norms of society, all this resonates deeply in today's world. And they dared to dream of a world where women could live authentically, where spirituality could inspire social change in a practical, day-to-day manner, and where love could transcend dogma. So we can take to heart their message of courage, community, love. So thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this talk, please like it and share it. Philosophy Live is here every Friday morning at the same time for the rest of the term. So we look forward to seeing you again. So have a good weekend.